So here we are. Full game has been out for about a month now. I was planning on this being a quick video that would go up soon after release, but in any case, it's never too late to dig into more Touhou media, and there's quite a bit to talk about here. Already just from playing the demo and also watching a friend play through it, I was just looking at the screen thinking, man, this game is kind of insane and evil. And then I got the chance to try it out for myself and yeah, it's pretty damn difficult. Took me a while to get that normal 1cc. Even the description for normal just admits it's difficult, and seriously, some of the patterns here I would expect from something closer to lunatic, like those mid-bosses in stages 4 and 5. Once in a while we just gotta do Eternal Meek again. Now, though I am someone who often appreciates a good challenge, that's not exactly a gauge of how good a video game is to me. Legacy Lunatic Kingdom is something, and I can't even thinking about putting myself through a single run of that game. But I digress. The reason I bring it up is because I found the challenge in Fossilized Wonders, speaking of normal difficulty here, pretty balanced and fun. That is assuming you're taking advantage of the systems provided to you, which you should. I previously said that I thought it was gonna be comparable to UFO, and yeah, I still stand by that, probably even above that game in some areas. Real quick, I do want to mention that streams are back over at twitch.tv/thtenko. I'm not on a set schedule for now, but I'll usually go live on either Monday, Wednesday or Friday, always around 3 PM EDT. Do stop by if you want to see me play Touhou games or fan games or anything, really. There have been some improvements since the demo though that I really appreciate. First of all, you get plenty of resources in this game, since the Wonderstone enemies now always drop bomb and life pieces on a set pattern, and with only 3 required to make a full one, it's pretty easy to stock up on this. Not to mention that for the first time since 10 Desires I think, you don't lose any extra bombs on death, so you don't even have to worry about quote-unquote wasting them that way. But to reap these benefits, you need to start chaining. Shooting down enemies in quick succession will fill up the gauge faster, and if you kill the aggressive ships quickly, you can retain up to half of that meter. So by playing your cards right, you can get plenty of spawns in a short amount of time, not only to amass resources, but also to get more uses of the hyper from whatever stone you have equipped. They will still spawn during boss fights though, however they will not fire any bullets in that context, which ends up being a better trade than just removing them, since you're still getting resources along with items to charge your hyper. This whole chain mechanic is yet another thing reminiscent of 10 Desires, the often misunderstood black sheep of Touhou games, though I will say that the way it's implemented here allows for the gameplay to be way more fluid and engaging compared to that other game. But if you ask me, that's not even the most exploitable aspect of this game. That would be that when Wonderstones die, they will clear almost all bullets on screen, at no cost from the player. And it got me thinking about what I said in my video on EOSD about these screen clearing fairies, how that would be a neat mechanic to see again. This is kinda it if you squint your eyes. A bit less balanced than I had envisioned, but I guess it's something. It doesn't completely break stages under normal circumstances though, and it does sometimes introduce a nice risk-reward dynamic. Do you stay in your safe spot and get through the attack normally, or do you squeeze through to the other side to shoot this enemy down, cancelling it completely and getting bombs or lives for your effort? Now, while I don't think Wonderstones and Hypers are completely essential, the game is clearly built around the idea of abusing both as much as possible, and it will make your runs much more tolerable once you get the hang of it. You could barely make it through a stage with no extra lives, but knowing you can potentially restock 1 or 2 on the next one. How easy this is depends on your setup of course, but unless you're intentionally picking something that doesn't help you at all, it should be pretty doable. So, the equipment. It's kinda par for the course at this point to have that classic issue of some options are marginally better than others. I think for the main stones, most of them are generally alright and are highly dependent on your playstyle, whether you prefer offense, defense, or a little bit of both. I'm gonna go ahead and say that this game greatly encourages a more aggressive playstyle, what with the combos and whatnot, though defensive options can also work towards that end. One of my worries in the demo was that hypers were gonna be too strong, but that is not the case most of the time. I don't think any of them are outright broken. In a vacuum, because yes, with specific setups you can snap this game in half just like that. How strong they are generally depends on how often you can proc them of course, and additionally the game does place a few barriers to make that a bit more difficult, such as progressively increasing the HP of the Wonderstone enemies in subsequent spawns. I find that they often get the most use during stages, where it's easier to influence the charge time, reason why for me this is one game where it's actually worthwhile to consider stages when choosing your build. That's not to say they're completely useless in boss fights, in fact some of them can provide a straight up unfair advantage if used at the right time, but since your options for charging the meter are limited and with little control over when it's activated, it feels more like it's on a timer. If you're looking to play without hypers though, your best bet is probably Beast Hardiness, because it does absolutely jack aside from giving you a bomb piece. Assist stones are kinda on the same boat, though 2 of them shine over the rest in my opinion. Creature Red, which makes your hyper charge up faster, making it essential if you're building around that, and Beast Hardiness, which makes Wonderstones weaker to attacks and therefore means that resources become even more plentiful plentiful, but you can probably fit any of them in and still have a good time. Much in the same way, there's two that I find kinda useless though. Shintoism Wind, which gets overshadowed by Creature Red since getting hypers more often is better in the long term than getting more out of a single use, and Blue Season, which just makes power items drop more often, in a game where, surprisingly, getting to full power is not difficult at all. Maybe that's the one you take if you don't really want a passive, I guess? Where you can get really creative though is with the shot types. You have the old reliable needles and missiles, as well as homing shots, lasers, options that do contact damage, options that delete bullets, stationary options when focused, and although there are some clear winners, most can carry you all the way through no problem. Blue Season is kinda ass though, again, losing power on the front just to get some back shots is not really worth it. Anyways, unlocking the stones is pretty easy too. Any run you manage to make it past stage 3, you'll get one stone of the same type as the one you equipped in your main slot. These are thankfully shared between both Reimu and Marisa, and realistically you probably don't really need more than one or two of each to try out any meaningful combination, though of course nothing's stopping you from getting all 3 copies. Sadly, while your main stone doesn't change anything in the game itself like I was really wishing it would, even though I knew it wasn't gonna happen. No way, they changed the beginning section of stage 4. Neato. Now, but they do affect one very important thing, and that would be the endings, which I regrettably can't show you here, but no rule saying I can't talk about them. This game has 16 different good endings, 8 for each character depending on what your main stone is, and that's kind of insane. Technically, if you were to count all the character cameos in these, I think this is the mainline game with the largest cost ever. Maybe behind Phantasmagoria games, I don't know, don't call me on any of this, I didn't do the math. Honestly, the main issues I have with this game are related to feedback, and for a moment made me think I was going a little insane. The faint thump sound you hear when a large enemy is close to death is so quiet for whatever reason, it's almost imperceptible unless you're really listening for it. It's a minor complaint, but that's something that I always appreciated since its introduction, to signal whether I should hold my position a little longer or if it's okay to move away for now and get more space. Also, I often got confused at the bonus failed text popping up after a spell card, I mean when I obviously didn't die or bump through it. Reason turns out is that I just didn't notice that I got tapped during a hyper. Though looking back at the footage, that's more of a me problem for not paying attention I guess, though in some fringe cases where bullets don't get deleted or with lasers, it can be a little hard to tell in between all the commotion. Some bosses will display the wrong number of spell cards, this doesn't affect the gameplay at all, but it was a little confusing during the first runs where I think I was on the last spell only for the fight to keep going. Like I really thought I was imagining things, but nope, it is fucked. Also, this little graphical glitch is still present, and hitboxes are all wrong. Please fix. Music is amazing, very weird and experimental for Sun. Again, like I said in the other video, I think he has finally perfected this new style he'd been crafting for a few years now, and I'm a huge fan of it. It really stands out with the often very sparse arrangements. My favorite has to be Ariel's theme, which is quickly becoming one of my favorite last boss themes. Some might say it's a bit unfitting, missing the more grandiose aspects one has come to expect for final bosses, especially for a character like Aria, as we'll see in a bit, but that's exactly why I like it. It's a well-needed break from the trend, and it does a really good job of reflecting the melancholic nature of her character. An interesting fact about the music is that apparently Sun had lost access to the SD90 module, since the driver for it hasn't been updated to work on current Windows versions, so those instruments are just not present, or if they are, then likely from a different source. For a recognizable example, the beloved romantic trumpet is used for only 3 songs in the entire game, and they all happen to be songs from the demo. Meanwhile, the new tracks tend to have strings or guitar taking the lead more often, with a different brass instrument occasionally showing up. But perhaps intentional or accidental, this can also be seen as a change. So the new girls. We got Yuma and Asama, who is already very interesting in name alone. One name is written in kana and another in kanji. Now there are 2 existing characters with a similarly strange name structure. Reisen, Udenge, and Inaba, wherein Reisen is the given name, while Udenge and Inaba are essentially nicknames given to her by others, and Shiki Eiki, Yamatsanadu. Family name Shiki, given name Eiki, Yamatsanadu is a title. Yuman's name could very much be the same. As for why Yuiman here is written in kana instead of kanji, I'm not really sure, but it does give that feeling that something about her was changed or corrupted. And yeah, she is deeply messed up, as far as Touhou characters go anyways, not in the sense that she herself is messed up, but rather the whole, everything going on. Brainwashed by Lunarians to cleanse data coming from the outside world of any impurities, that is to say, anything regarding life. In fact, it's even referred to as life information, which then gets fed into the lunar capital to preserve their eternity. And it was long overdue to learn the workings behind that. We've known for a while how the yokai and gods of Gensokyo procure their existence, but not the Lunarians. But thanks to artificial artificial intelligence in the outside world stockpiling too much trash data, Yui-man was driven insane to the point of seeing hallucinations and feeling relief once she returns to her normal self and meets with a real human. And this is reflected in her spell cards pretty neatly, being very frantic and one of them even using various kinds of bullets, mirroring the whole overload of data. Of course, at the end of the day, she's little more than a vehicle to communicate the whole AI allegory of the damage caused by this flood of often false information, but I've grown quite fond of her personally, and people have already jumped at her ties with another character we'll see in a bit, and Kanako, which we'll not say in a bit because this section is already long as it is. Next we have a returning character, Watetsuki no Toyohime, which came as a shock to literally everyone because really, what the hell? No one was expecting to see these guys again. First after Sun just straight up said they were too strong to appear in a game, and just maybe, he was right, but also because of the bad rep they generally get in the community. And in any case, if one of them was gonna show up, I'm sure most people would have guessed this one. But here she is, with a really nice arrangement of Watetsuki's spell card to boot. Part of me wishes both of the sisters had shown up, with Reimu meeting Yorihime and Marisa, well, Toyohime, because I just can't let that idea go, can I? But I guess it makes more sense for this one to be here, her abilities making her the perfect candidate for managing the connection between Gensokyo and the lunar capital, the mountain and the sea, if you will. Iwanaga area is based on Iwanaga Hime, the goddess of longevity, perpetuity, or immortality, sister to Konohana Sakuya Hime, and actually briefly mentioned during Keiichi Lunatic Runagate. That was about 18 years ago, by the way. Her design is very weird, and by extension very cool. I really love what Sun did with the newer characters here. They really are striking, but in a way that feels natural. I don't know, I didn't get the usual adaptation period, if you will. That wait until a new character settles into the world. I love the vague musical theming she has going on, the half-mask reminiscent of the final of the opera, and also referencing how in Mythos, Iwanaga Hime was rejected for her appearance. Her name possibly being a play on aria, a musical piece written for one voice, with Sun even saying that her theme would have paired well with a vocal track. There's a lot here. All that said, the fight itself is honestly pretty tame for a final boss. She makes full use of these new diamond-shaped bullets, but that novelty wears off pretty quickly, and especially her last spell is definitely not as striking as one has come to expect. I do like though that during the final phase, when she freezes the background, her attacks become immune to all bullet cancels, even the one from where you lose a life, which is a nice way to tie into her ability to stop all change, and also completely nullifies a bunch of setups. And then we have Dameko Fossil, which is honestly a neat idea for a spell card, but it will spawn on top of you, killing you instantly. And finally we have Waterinina, a Shen recently born within the pyramid, that is, a monster able to create mirages, often depicted as a shellfish or a dragon. While the Lunarians are to represent stagnation and rejection of all change, Nina is on the opposite end as someone that readily believes anything. Sadly, once you're past a slap in the face that is the names of her spell cards, there's not much more going on here. I guess I just needed someone to embody this other side of things. The extra stage is neat, doesn't seem to be one of the hardest, but it definitely took me a while to clear. Also brings back those things from PC98 and PCB at the end, which, nice, I didn't miss them. Please don't do that again. Same could be said for Nina herself. Her spell cards can be tricky even if they don't look like it. Chocolate River is a surprisingly creative spell for Touhou, even if it does look like a log of shit going across the screen. Her non-spells though are a pain in the ass and I just avoided them whenever possible because, what the hell, man. The story is pretty straightforward this time around. I'm not gonna go over every single detail, but basically Yui-man's malfunction put the lunar capital in danger of losing their eternal status. Thus, Toyohime unsealed Aria so she could use her power to freeze this uncontrolled flow of information, with Gensokyo getting caught in the middle as usual. This of course was only a temporary fix, as Lunarians are by nature incapable of dealing with any sort of existential crisis, I guess, so she was hoping that Mommy Eating would show up to save their ass. Again. And she did, crafting the incident where Aria freezes Gensokyo, during which a human would surely come to defeat her using these stones holding the power of previous incidents. These were crafted by Mizumaru and delivered to the heroines by Yukari. Aria agreed to this since she's not on good terms with the Lunarians to begin with, having taken her shrine for themselves, that is the pyramid, and also in hopes that she could free Yui-man from their clutches, being that the two of them were enshrined here together in the past. Of course, the plan works, Gensokyo returns to its normal state of accepting change, and the Lunarians, well, it's not really clear what they got out of this, but it would seem they are also fine. I will say, it's always nice to see the Moon people play an active role as we get more tidbits of what's going on with them. Especially again, learning what their source of life is, or non-life rather, is pretty big, I'd say. It is also very much a celebration of this milestone the city's achieved. Of course you have the stones based on previous incidents, but what I find more interesting is that it is a story about not giving up to stagnation and accepting change, within reason that is. And I think that's very fitting for the ever-changing world that is Gensokyo and just Touhou as a whole, not only in lore, but because after all, this is not the same series that it was back in the 2000s or even the 2010s. I've seen some interpret the incident stones as a stand-in for fanworks, as in someone else basing their own work on these stories, which are then used to bring life back to Gensokyo. I don't think that's quite right. I really think it's just trying to celebrate itself here, but that's definitely a very romantic way to say it, I guess. Of course, the main theme is changes and how one reacts to them. Toll also threw the whole commentary on AI, generative AI specifically, that is as obvious and in your face as always. That's just how Sun does things, you either love it or hate it, and I'm kinda on a per case basis. This time around, I think it's really good at highlighting both extremes of the discussion: the unregulated use and over-reliance on still immature technology and the marketing of it as a one-fits-all solution that can replace human labor and thinking, and the complete rejection of it and anyone who decides to experiment with it, which more often than not leads to false accusations and a refusal to learn how it works and what can we do to improve it. Though the criticism is overall a negative one. I mean, in the narrative, the two characters that end up enveloped in all this information caused by an overuse of AI in the outside world are pretty much driven mad by it. And of course you have the backgrounds to drive home that point even further. Every ending begins in the same way, with Arya telling the heroine, "What happens now is up to you." And that mystified me for a while because I was taking it too literally, like I was waiting to get an answer. But that's exactly it, I think. That's the message the game is conveying, summed up in one sentence. We are constantly presented with new ideas and concepts that we can welcome or push away. A lack of critical thinking will lead to both blind acceptance and blind rejection. One is an unwillingness to question the nuances and details of anything presented, leading someone to believe they have a greater understanding while completely oblivious to their very narrow view of the world. The other is complete stagnation, remaining with what's already familiar and comfortable while refusing to move on or even try and understand a situation, leading to extremely conservative and reactionary behavior. It's no surprise that this last one is even likened to death. So what's the right answer? Well, that's up to you. So I was gonna end this video too with a few points on the AI usage. Actually was in the middle of a very long-winded section about it before it was ultimately scrapped. Got far beyond the scope of this video. Maybe I'll actually do a write-up somewhere else at some point, but bottom line now is, I'm not bothered by Sun using Gen AI to further the message he wants to communicate. In fact, it's a pretty creative use of it, all things considered. And yeah, any and all concerns expressed about it are valid and real, though I feel we are straying into hyperbole very often, trying to pin every issue with the technology on a very tame example. And again, I have my issues with Sun, mostly related to PR and him striving to keep this small dev working from a basement image, while also, say, issuing copyright claims. But I digress. For now, this little stunt still doesn't make it into my list. That's all I have to say for now. I truly do think Fossilized Wonders is phenomenal though. Maybe the best mainline entry we've had in recent years. Like, I really thought I'd just play around a little for this video, just try to get a no continue clear, and I ended up getting carried away because I was just having so much fun with it and experimenting with different builds. That aside, it really is a celebration of an impressive milestone for a series that began as nothing more than some guy's school project, but that nonetheless has managed to have a profound impact on its medium, the entire doujin scene, and of course, everyone willing to engage with the work itself. As always, thank you so much for watching, consider subscribing to support the channel, leave a like, as well as anything you wanna tell me in the comments below. May Gensokyo last forevermore.